My name is Nathan Chaney. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself in a minute, but I really appreciate the invite from Chris to come back and speak here at UNT. I just was in class in 010 across the other side of the hall last night because I'm working on my MBA here. But we'll learn a little bit more about that in a minute. I do want to encourage you all to raise your hands, ask questions and kind of get engaged, as the slides said before. It's fun to come up and talk and stuff, but it's even more fun to be engaging and actually have conversations about these things. So with that, I tried to kind of think through, if I was a student again, what's something that I could have heard presented by someone out in the industry that could have helped me when I was sitting in the seats that you're sitting in now. And what I reflected on is that I've had a lot of jobs and I've learned a little bit from all of them. And hopefully there's an opportunity out, in these next slides of something that you all pick up to help you kind of make a decision to go one direction or another, or have some answers to questions that you've been having yourself that you haven't had answers. So that's really the goal for today, other than really bad pixely pictures, is just to shed a little bit of light on what's coming down the path. I am going to kind of just assume most of y'all are undergrads. Anyone grad students? No grad student. I'm the grad student in here then. Okay, so all right. So I'll try to tailor it to an undergrad. Haven't really worked out in the corporate world a lot yet type of theme. Anyone have had any internships yet? Yep, so we've got a few. Okay, sweet. That's a requirement for the logistics program. I don't know about all the other HR and accounting and business analytics departments, but in logistics, it's like a requirement that you have to have a paid internship, right? So there's a lot to do out in the world, and in the next hour, I'm gonna try to shed some light on what there is to do out there. So a little bit about the person standing up here in front of the room, though, at the moment. I am a small town Texan, born and raised out in a small little farming community out in East Texas. Neither of my parents went to college, so it was kind of on me to figure out how to do this. And started out at Tyler Junior College, which was a really formative and good experience for me. Coming from a graduating high school class of 35, it was kind of mind-blowing to think about coming to a campus of 35,000. So I tried to take baby steps, went to the junior college first. Turns out it's like one of the largest junior colleges in the US, and it still had 10,000 students. So it was still pretty big, but it had that kind of smaller town feel. So it was really good. There I got an associate's degree in business administration. Toward the end of that time there, I was talking to the head of the business department and said, hey, I don't think this business administration thing is going to help me a lot out in the job force. Can you point me in the direction of something more specialized, something more up and coming? And he said, you should go check out that logistics degree program up in Denton. So I came up here one weekend, noticed that it was green everywhere. My favorite color at that time was green. And learned a little bit about logistics. I thought, man, I'm used to be a kid playing with toys and trucks in the mud with my Legos. Logistics sounds like that, so I'll do that. That was about as scientific of an approach as I took to picking what I would ultimately do the rest of my life. And out of that bit of a crapshoot, I got pretty lucky, because as you all often know, that a lot of folks will go into school, study something, and then kind of take a 180-degree turn and go do something not quite related to what they just spent a lot of their money or their parents' money or the government's money on to go learn, right? But all education is good education, really, ultimately, in the end. So I got my supply chain degree here at UNT. Other school stuff, while I was working at TI, I started working on my MBA at UT Dallas. Subsequently left, and now I'm paying for my own school, so I came here to UNT, and it's also closer. So just working on a general business MBA, no specialization. One of the things I've learned here is that as you kind of move through your sort of career as a business professional, you become more and more of a business generalist and less of a technical sort of expert in whatever field you're in. So if it's business analytics or HR, when you become that VP of HR, you kind of got to know accounting and finance and organizational development and sales and everything. So I'm just doing the MBA general. personal sort of biography info, I am a jack of all trades, master of none. A curious George. You little kids that ask you why like 100 times, that's me, but in a more adult format. Definitely an adventurer. I've been to 28 countries. I think I'm leaving tomorrow to go to Chile to check that one off the list. It doesn't hurt that my wife's a flight attendant. That makes traveling around the world a little easier. I'm a perpetual networker, so I would love to meet and get to know all of you. There's only so many hours in a day, so there is some challenges there to meeting everyone in the world, but if I could, I would. Also, I've kind of just defaulted into this mentor type of role over the years, and I think it's just because I like to help people. And that's kind of one of the ways that I get fulfillment out of my job and out of my personal life is just helping others. Entrepreneur, I use that loosely. Yes, I kind of have had my own business now and work for myself, but whenever I think of entrepreneur, I typically think of the folks that you see on TV that are on like Forbes and Bloomberg TV, and they're up kind of presenting about their IPO going live next week and that sort of stuff. And so I'm much more small town kind of entrepreneur than that. But for me, I'm happy with that. So there's kind of different levels of success for everyone. It feels weird still to call myself an entrepreneur, but I'm kind of getting used to it, I guess. My life quote is, "A ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships were built for," which is really just I actually don't like being comfortable. I like to be uncomfortable and always doing something new and different, which kind of goes along with these other concepts that you saw up here, right? So you'll probably see that throughout my career that if I ever started getting too comfortable, that meant it's time to go do something different. Not everyone's going to take that approach. That doesn't work for everybody, but for some folks, it will. Just a few old school pictures of my younger days and the kinds of things that I did before I had business cards, right? So high school, I was mowing yards. I worked at a Christmas tree farm out in East Texas, waited tables at multiple locations, did a bit of tutoring, including here at UNT. Actually worked at a call center up over by TWU. I was selling vacation, timeshares for Bass Pro Shop, vacation destinations. I think I lasted a month. That's an experience, along with waiting tables, that I feel like everyone should have just for life. When I was at TJC, I was not only kind of in the band, but also there was an honor society there called Phi Theta Kappa, which is the honor society for junior colleges. And I was the president of that back then. And then Delta Sig, any Delta Sig brothers in the house? No, okay. So Delta Sig is a business fraternity that's for, it's not just guys, it's guys and girls, but we call everyone brothers anyway. And so that was here at UNT, and that was a really great experience. It was a little bit fun, a little bit social, but also business-minded as well. So if y'all have any thoughts about getting involved with groups, I would encourage you to take a look at that one. And then I think my other job, if you could almost list it, was getting scholarships. I think I might have gotten about 10 scholarships throughout my time in school. My parents didn't give me a penny for school. I funded it all myself through a lot of different scholarships. In fact, there's a chapter in a book called How to Fund Your College Degree or something like that. And there's one that is called Nathan Chaney. And it's basically sharing my story of how I kind of not worked the system, but took the steps necessary to be able to be a good candidate for scholarships. There you go. So again, any of these sort of topics and things, happy to chat with any of you about. Moving on. Okay, so first business card. So you'll see we're going to make a journey across the bottom here. So this first one was an internship for a company called Siva. Why did I get it? Because I had to, which is actually a good reason. And whenever the program managers and the degree folks here at UNT say, here's the things that we want y'all to do, and we think it's going to help you grow as a professional and as a person, they have your best interest in mind. Just like you all, I guess, having to come to 2 of these sort of lectures, although it may seem, like a drain on your time and you'd rather be doing something else, but hopefully in the end, these things actually do help grow you and put you in a better place than you would have been without being exposed to some of these other thoughts. My experience there was like a 5 out of 5, mostly because it was so long ago. All I have is like rosy, positive thoughts about it. I don't remember any of the bad stuff. That kind of happens in life, right? So what I liked there is I had a lot of autonomy. I liked my manager, who was also a UNT alumni, and I liked the facility. It was a brand new facility they just built on the DFW airport. My job was to go write basically all the SOPs, which is the process documents for all the different departments. Oddly enough, I am currently right now hiring an intern for one of my clients who is going to do nothing but go write SOPs. So the same thing that I did as my first internship, I've seen that it's actually a really good value add to a company, but it's also a great learning experience for a student or someone that's not worked yet. So you get to go and see how a bunch of different operations, different people do their jobs, and then document them. So I also learned about 3PL. When you're in class, you learn about third-party logistics, but until you're really in a place, you don't 100% understand all the ins and outs of it. So I got to understand a little bit about what that was like. Second card, at the recommendation / introduction of Dr. Poland here at UNT, he kind of said, hey, go talk to those folks at PepsiCo. They've got an opening for an internship, think it'll be cool. So I went and chatted with them, and I was able to land that as a second internship. So one thing I would advise you all is, if at all possible, do more than one internship. Do 3 or 4. It's a lot like trying on shoes. You don't really just like walk in to the shoe store, put on the first one, say, yeah, that's it, I'll take it, right? You try on multiple shoes, and that's a little bit what an internship is like. It's a little bit like dating without the long-term sort of commitment, and able to see if that industry, if that company, if that type of role is appealing to you or not. And you know, you only need to be there 3 or 4 months. You kind of do your time, learn, take some learning lessons, and then move on. My experience there was a 5 out of 5. Why? Because they had like free drink station down in the break room, like all the Mountain Dew I could drink and all the Doritos and whatever you could have. So that was pretty cool. The other thing about it was that PepsiCo makes things, right? So they are the shipper in that whole logistics equation. And so I got to experience what it's like to be on the shipping side. Specifically, what I did there is I measured the carbon footprint of all of PepsiCo's transportation. So that was for Tropicana, Quaker, Frito-Lay, Pepsi, whatever other business units they had, taking the carbon output of all the transportation for all those businesses and boiling it down into one number. It took me the whole 3 or 4 months to do that. Whenever you have to deal with hundreds of thousands or millions of transportation moves, that becomes too big of a problem to solve in Excel. So then I had to go learn Access a little bit better, and built these models in Access and trained other folks that came after me to be able to go talk to all the carriers, talk to all the different companies under PepsiCo and grab all that carbon output data to come up with a final number. That was about the same time that the EPA was coming out with this Smart Away program. So PepsiCo was like one of the initial folks in that program, so that was a pretty cool experience. And by the end of that, I learned, and kind of that number I came up with was that the carbon emissions footprint for PepsiCo is larger than some countries' total carbon output, right? So that was really interesting. Along with learning that Tropicana has a train that's called the Tropicana train, that they move the raw orange juice like from where it's processed into kind of the final processing areas. And I had to include the carbon emissions of the Tropicana train in the calculations, right? So pretty cool. It was a really good experience to see what a big kind of corporate name brand, household name type place is. Whenever you say, hey, I work here, I'm doing this here, you always kind of get this little sense of pride, like, I do that, that's cool. And that's a fun, warm, fuzzy feeling to get. There are downsides to it, which we'll talk to those in a little bit. But from there, I had to move on. And why did I have to move on? It was because this was like 2009, when the economy was in the toilet. And so PepsiCo had a hiring freeze on, and they said, you're welcome to remain an intern indefinitely until this hiring freeze lifts. We have no idea when it will lift. You can work 30 hours a week, And at the time, it was $20 an hour. I don't know what the going rates are these days, but I was like, hey, I want to go have a full-time job. I want 40 hours a week. I want a salary. This 30 hours a week isn't going to cut it. Looking back now, I wish I would have thought differently and just been more patient and just stayed there. If I would have just stayed, waited for that internship to turn into a full-time job, I would probably still be working at PepsiCo now, right? But because of those circumstances, I kind of had to go make some moves. So that move was to a company called Crane Worldwide, 3PL. That was in Capel. Why did I go there? Because of the hiring freeze at PepsiCo, and I'm not a patient person. Because of the bad economy, I got introduced to like the VP of sales at Crane by the VP of supply chain at PepsiCo. Like they knew each other. He said, hey, here's a possible way you could get a full-time job, but there's like none of them available. So if these people are willing to hire you, you should just take it. So that's what I did. What I liked there was it was a wide variety of tasks. And at the time, I had a pretty decent manager that kind of let me do my own thing. Interestingly, I was hourly, so I did not actually accomplish that whole salary sort of as my first job. But the thing is, I worked like 60 hours a week, so I got like 20 hours of overtime every week. Manager did not quite notice that, so I was getting paid pretty well, much better than probably what they budgeted for. And so I was pretty happy with that situation until that got found out. And someone was like, hey, we should put him on salary and bring that overtime cost down. So a couple of things that I learned, as you can kind of see the different things that I did, is I learned that for my personality, ocean freight is kind of boring because it takes from the time that the container leaves on one side of the world and is on a ship for a week or two, and you're like, okay, did that container arrive yet? No. Okay, then you just go back and wait, track some other containers or whatnot. So the pace of sort of activity in ocean and international logistics is kind of slower. Not with air freight though. Air freight's very fast. The plane takes off in Sydney, lands here in Dallas 17 hours later. That's a pretty fast transaction. There's a lot of movement there. But ocean freight is a little bit slow. I did learn that warehouse is my jam, that warehousing and distribution was really fitting of my personality. And so that was one thing that I got to learn from there. And then the last sort of big one I learned was that always do your best, which is probably a cliche. Everyone tells you always do your best, right? You never know who's watching. It actually turned out that because of the work that I did here in this role, I got my next job opportunity at the next company I went to because I made some really cool PowerPoints and really cool Excel spreadsheets for one of the VPs at Crane, right? He moved over to another company, remembered kind of how I did those things and said, hey, come over here and help me with this company that I'm getting going. So again, just kind of remember your work is gonna kind of be remembered longer than you are, and after you leave the room, people are gonna be talking about you. So the fourth stop was just right down the hall. So that particular company, Crane Worldwide, started a sister company called Crane Freight and Cartage. I just always called it Crane. I moved into an operations agent role, and it was just getting started. The whole business, the whole company was just getting started. And they had just won the Harley-Davidson account. And so that was to do all of the outbound distribution coming out of the Milwaukee plant and distribute all the bikes to all the dealerships, not only just in North America, not only like the US, but like North America and then overseas as well. So what I liked about that was being able to have like a cool customer, like Harley-Davidson was the customer, pretty sweet. We had a dedicated fleet of Werner trucks, and so the Werner folks had people sitting in the office right next to us, dispatching and handling all the trucks and whatnot, and then me and a few other folks on the Crane side were here just kind of administering and helping coordinate everything. So that was pretty cool. I did kind of go back into my pictures and old documents and found where I made a Google Maps thing of the routes for delivering to the Harley-Davidson dealerships out of our Dallas DC here. So the trucks would go out and make this run, come back, get more bikes, go out and make this run, etc. And then there was a consistent run from Dallas to Milwaukee coming out, right, and feeding the hub here in DFW. So what I learned from there was planning these routes out, right? Like how many stops can the driver make in one day? How much cargo can he hold? What's the average amount of orders and bikes each of those distributors or each of those stores is getting each week? And how do you just make all the time and cargo and capacity sort of work out to make this network work? Yes?
So whenever they were coming from Milwaukee to Dallas, were you moving those by train and then by truck? So was it an intermodal movement, or was it all by truck?
Truck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything. Okay.
Over time, you can start to learn the patterns and things better and then move to a more efficient sort of way. But typically when you're just starting something, it's like, just get it done, make it happen. And then you can refine and make it more efficient over time. So experience there was 4 out of 5. Not the greatest, but I can't really pick out anything that was just, that I did not like about it. It wasn't quite at the level of what PepsiCo was like for me. What I learned there also was fleet management. Because we had that dedicated fleet in the building with us, I got to see a little bit about how that operates and how it was directly managing trucks that are going over the road, and got to hear kind of those stories and whatnot. Next move was across the hall from that. So if you look, I was doing this for 7 months, this one for 10 months, and then a little over a year in this spot. So just in these 3 little hops, that was just less than a few years right there. But each one was its own unique sort of role and responsibility. In this particular one, I think that they'd noticed that I knew how to work Excel pretty well and do computer stuff. So I was kind of put in this business analyst type role. Here, I was in charge of invoicing for all of this distribution that was happening, and I created and sent that invoice to Harley-Davidson. Might have been UPS Supply Chain Solutions because they were the actual manager of their supply chain. But I just remember at the time, I'm in my early 20s, and I'm sending invoices for millions of dollars, and I'm just like, whoa, this is a lot of responsibility. If I put one extra zero or I leave one out here, that's important stuff. So it was really cool to be able to be trusted with that, I guess is really the point I'm trying to make. What I learned here is that having a good manager is really key to your satisfaction at work, right? There's that saying that people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers. And so I learned that having a manager that you trust, that is respectful, that has your best interests in mind, all those sort of good things, that's really important. And it really makes a big difference in how you retain talent in your company. Another one is I got to start learning how it's a lot about who you know. And so Crane was actually created by the same folks that created what was before SIVA, which was called Eagle. And so it was a lot of the same people that worked at one company when another company was formed by that leader or that CEO, that president. Then they pulled over a lot of folks from the old company and started again. And so it got to kind of be where if you just knew the right people, then you didn't actually need to perform at 100%, or you did not need to do work as hard as everyone else to keep your job. And it was really around here that I started learning how these kind of politics and relationships work in businesses. And so if it works in your favor, if you're the person who knows the right people, it's good. And if you're the person who doesn't know the right people, but you're busting your butt to do a really good job and you're not seeing the type of rewards or things coming your way as a result of that, then it there's a little bit of friction. Another thing that I learned here was that innovation is a pretty big deal in logistics. So one of the things that was really, really cool here is you can see this like metal skid right here. You can see the Harley guys putting that new bike on it. So a big part of the reason why this company at the time kind of won this contract, as best as I can recall, is because they kind of engineered these steel skids and the trailers that you could slide all these skids on, and you could double stack bikes on your trailers. So rather than just putting them on the floor, they came up with a way to have twice the amount of capacity in one trailer, and came up with the way to be able to accomplish that. One coming out of the plant in Milwaukee, making the first run down to a distribution center like here in Dallas, and then how to actually use that same skid and sort of loading technology to be able to deliver to the dealers everywhere. So that was, one, a headache to make it work. But once you were able to kind of work out the kinks, it was a differentiator and is what kind of allowed them to win that business and build a whole company around it, really. The other thing I learned is that money makes money. So the guy that owns Crane, Jim Crane, he was in a bidding war against Nolan Ryan's group to buy the Rangers, right? So that happened some time ago. He ended up not winning the bid and not being able to purchase the Rangers. So a couple years later, he bought the Astros. And he's a Houston business guy, so the Astros were his home team. Makes a lot of sense. But what was funny is I as a consolation prize, after not being able to buy the Rangers, you know, like when you like have your money in your pocket and you're ready to like go to the store and like spend some money and the thing's not there, you're like, man, I was really planning on spending this money. And you see something else shiny, you're ready to go for it because you're like just in the mood. So he bought a golf and yacht club in Florida. And I was like, man, that's just how that works, I guess. You know, it's just different. There's a couple more commas and zeros in those checks, but there's still this idea of when you have money, especially, you know, if you're smart with it, you're going to use it to make more money and invest and get returns and continue to build your business. That was one of the things that I learned kind of in that experience. I'll pause for just a second. Any like questions? You had a good question a moment ago. Okay, I'm just going to take a pause. Yes, go ahead. Yeah. I totally missed the really one good point I wanted to make on that slide. Thank you. The other thing that I neglected to put on the what I learned there is when I was at the 3PL, it was very much, yes, sir, yes, Mr. Customer, we'll get right on that. Sorry that the shipment was late. We're going to do everything we can to make it right. We're going to do this and do that. And when I got to PepsiCo, and remember, like my job was to talk to all the carriers and have them give me all their fleet carbon emissions data. When it was PepsiCo calling the carrier, the 3PL, it was, yes, sir, I'll get right to you. I'm sorry for the delay. I apologize. There's, our accounting interns are slow in the back. We'll get them right on it. And so it was interesting to see, in one, you're the service provider, right? And so you are kind of needing to explain why things are going wrong and kind of solve a lot of problems. When you are the shipper, when you're the person that's making the goods and manufacturing, and you have carriers and you have 3PLs, you are in the power seat. So you're the customer. You're the one who is taken out to steak dinners and sent some chocolates for your birthday, and you're treated really well. And it's just a whole kind of different ball game to be in that seat. And I think it was really cool that I was able to see both sides. I kind of call it like seeing both sides of the industry, the service provider side and the shipper side. So that was kind of the difference. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah. Yes, for sure. So PepsiCo being a Fortune 500 company, you have tons of like legal people, HR people, accounting people, marketing and communications people, all these folks that cover all the areas of the business and help make your job easier because you can just focus on your one sort of narrow lane, your duty for that day. When you're at, especially, SIVA or a lot of 3PLs are kind of much smaller in nature. There's not a whole ton of them that are Fortune 500 really big corporations. So in that role, you had to wear a lot of hats. You had to, you felt more pressure because you had to do a lot more things that maybe is not in your wheelhouse. And so that kind of sense of stress and pressure was greater, for sure. The other thing I'll mention is in the logistics space, a lot of times what I have found is that you make lower margins. There's just less profit at the end of the day. There's a lot of competition. There's a whole lot of 3PLs, a whole lot of trucking companies out there. So because of all that profit is a little bit less, profit margins, compared to the big, household brand names that because they have that marketing power, they can achieve higher margins, which that translates to the cool, the snacks in the break room and your salary and your benefits and your extra bonuses at the end of the year. There's a there's a pretty big difference that I found because I have been in 3PL world and I've been in shipper side, that shippers just seem to have bigger budgets to pay for their teams, their facilities, and everything that's kind of related with those things. Whereas 3PLs are just a little more budget constrained, if you will, on that front. That help?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Yes.
Your movement from the 3 different crane companies.
Yes.
When you moved over to another one, did you retain any sense of like seniority or position?
Mm-hmm.
Or they kind of treat you as like a brand new employee?
Seniority, got a little pay bump, a little pay increase and all that sort of stuff each time. And the sort of, if you want to say how many years of service you've had, sticks, right? Yeah, it sticks. The cool thing was that I have an entrepreneurial type of mindset, so it was pretty cool to be able to go to a company that literally just started yesterday and be able to help build it from nothing. That was a pretty cool experience because that's something that I like in life, but it's not everybody's jam, right? Moving on here, 6th stop, we're halfway there, folks, halfway there, literally halfway there. This is kind of where that, when I was telling you back at Crane to always do your best work, this is what the result of that was one of those executives from Crane left, went to Main Freight and started the warehousing distribution division of the company as one single person. And after a little while of him kind of getting to the point where it was too much work for him to be able to do it by himself, he remembered me, right? And took me out to lunch and said, hey, I've been putting together this new department, this new division at Main Freight. It's a really great company. I'd really like if you'd come help me out and be the second person to help grow this division. So that of course spoke to my entrepreneurial sort of side, right? But also there was, it was a new environment, a new challenge, and there was a bit of a pay increase involved, right? And I just kind of had a feeling that I was not being used to my potential in the role that I was at previously, and that this was going to be an opportunity for me to have another blank canvas to go and build and design and kind of grow something from scratch again. So I took him up on the opportunity. Did a lot of traveling. The company, Main Freight, was based in New Zealand, so I got to go to New Zealand and Australia and spent a good amount of time there. Also because I was helping to stand up the whole warehousing distribution division in the U.S., I got to travel all throughout the U.S., from LA to New York and everywhere in between to help just set up warehousing distribution facilities across the country. The cool thing that I learned here, one, is that company culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if your company, you feel respected and valued and continually challenged and you're being developed, there's so many of these little intangibles that are hard to put your fingers on, but that really make your job satisfaction and that of your colleagues night and day difference from a company that doesn't have that kind of culture. And that's hard as a job applicant for you to get a sense for that before you work for that company, right? So one thing I would encourage you to do is when you're thinking about working for a company, go onto LinkedIn or Glassdoor and find people that work there now and talk to those folks that are not necessarily in the department you might work for. Try to go find people that used to work there that don't work there anymore and ask them, why did they leave? What did they think about it? Because you might get a more honest sort of scoop on things. The other really interesting thing about this was that it was a New Zealand-based company, and so the values and the way it just operated was so different than American companies. And one of those things was that every single person in the company, the forklift drivers up to CEO, everyone was salaried. There was not a single person that was an hourly worker. So what that meant is that everyone was there, not really like, hey, I got my 40 hours, I got to go, or hey, can I work extra this weekend because I'm going to get some overtime? Everyone was there trying to be as efficient as they could so they could all go home as early as possible at the end of the day, because we were all kind of in the same cohort, if you will, all trying to achieve the same thing, which was to be efficient and get home and not work more overtime, not work more hours. The other thing was that they did profit sharing, right? And it was profit sharing at the branch level, single site level. So if that site was profitable, the half of the profit was split up by everyone on the team. So there were so many like little things like this that just helped people want to work there. And there was a lot of leadership development. I mentioned that I went to New Zealand and whatnot. It was, I was actually part of a group of like promising leaders, I guess if you'd say, where they took 2 or 3 of us from every continent, 2 or 3 from Asia, 2 or 3 from Europe, 2 or 3 from US, South America, Asia, and they sent us all down to New Zealand for 10 days out in the outback where we got taught how to sail. We did rock climbing blindfolded. We did all this like crazy leadership development stuff that helped us to build ourselves as leaders and professionals. The crazy thing was, it was kind of like going to a retreat, right? And then coming back and learning things about yourself. And actually, it was so transformational for a lot of people that a lot of people came back and quit because they realized that their true like desire in life and goal in life was not actually what they were doing. And I asked someone, I was like, man, I know this wasn't cheap, flying us all down there and doing all this. What's the logic? And he said, well, look, it's like if you don't develop the 80% of the people that stay, you're going to have some losses, the 20% of the people that realize this is not for them. But for the 80%, the amount of leadership development that you're going to get and the gains you're going to get from the long term more than pays for itself, right? So anyway, so those kinds of lessons are really what I learned, really what I learned there. The next stop was my first official job as a manager, was also in Mainfreight. So I went from for a few years, helping like kind of start all these different branches, but they weren't officially standalone operations yet, to when we really broke out the division and made it its own, if you want to say, separate entity. And then I got asked to be one of those first branch managers, and I got to build my own warehouse here in Flower Mound. So it was 130 or 140,000 square feet. Walked in, did shopping, right? Got to shop around, find the building we wanted, and then I used SketchUp and designed the whole facility, right? Obviously, I'd had practice at it because I'd been doing it for the past 3 years throughout other facilities. So why did I get picked, I think? I think because I had so much leadership development put into me, right? I was kind of ready for that. The other thing is, I think like I said, jack of all trades. When you are having to build a facility, hire all the team, get all of the customers, design and set up all the processes and start something from scratch, you really have to be able to do all parts of the business. So you really put every single one of your business classes to use, right? And then just worked hard. I think that was that just small town country boy, Walmart is 15 miles away, and if you got to fix something, you've got some duct tape and a zip tie over here, you get it done. And at the end of the day, a lot of times that's work, is if you can accomplish something with nothing or very little resources, that just makes you a more valuable asset to the company. The things I learned here, because I was a manager for the first time, I learned about managing a P&L, right? All of the costs, all the profits, and everything that involved this facility I was responsible for. I like to tell people it was like having my own lemonade stand at, 27 years old or something like that. But it was a lemonade stand that, was a pretty big operation. Also, if you have that good culture that I was talking about, it makes your job as a manager much easier because all of your team and everyone that gets hired all kind of knows what's expected of them. And it just makes your life easier. Also, cleanliness and branding is a big differentiator. And I feel that real job satisfaction really comes from people, if you're a people person, that your real fulfillment kind of comes with developing people and helping them to better themselves, not so much profit. So quick stories on this. This is a big-ass fan. It might have been a different brand. But when we built this facility, again, there was nothing there before. It was hot in the summer. It gets hot here. And so I had this idea that I wanted to put these big fans, try to cool the facility down for the folks. And I had waited, and I was waiting a little bit until the CEO or president of the US division was going to come visit my facility. And I was going to try to bring it up with him and my boss, who was the VP, and say, hey, are you okay if I spend some money on these fans? They're like $5,000 a piece, and I need like 4 or 5 of them. I just want to get your approval before I do that. And I'll never forget that the CEO turned to me, and he did have a New Zealand accent, but I won't try to mimic it now. But he basically said, "Mate, what are you waiting for? Just get it done." And so that was really kind of exactly how that company ran, which was empowering everyone to kind of just take the action that needs to be done. And because I was ultimately responsible for the P&L, it was on my scorecard at the end of the day whether that was a good decision to spend that money or not. And so that experience there, I think, really kind of made things painful for me in job sort of roles that I had in the future, where I did not have that kind of autonomy and have that sort of ability to make decisions on my own without having to get 5 or 10 different people to sign off on it. There it was very much, if you want to paint the walls pink because you think that's going to improve your efficiency, do it. And if not, then paint them back white the next week. That's all you got to do. So again, it kind of set a standard for me that has been tough to match. It's been tough to match. And the second story here. This is Akshay and Bharat and his wife. This is my wife here. Akshay and Bharat I hired as interns when I was in this facility. I started the internship program at Main Freight. These were my first two. They both stayed with Main Freight. One of them's a branch manager now. One of them has just left after quite a few years. But Akshay just got married in India, and I got an invite, as well as Bharat, who is his friend. So I just came back like a week ago, just flew back in from going to his wedding in India. And so I just say that because that people in relationship development that you do along your journey sticks with you much longer than the paycheck and the bonus check and whatever it is that you got or the title you had on your door. Those people in relationships is really what you're going to remember and what's going to impact your life the most. So I'm going to keep moving here. The next one is, so this one's interesting because I really, really, really liked Main Freight, if you can't tell. Really liked it. After I built this facility and got it up and going, it got branch of the year in its second year in existence, and we turned a profit and all that sort of good stuff. But I had spent so much pain and blood and suffering and long days getting this going that I needed something new. Like I came here, built a business, got it going. I'm ready for my next assignment. And they're really, because it was a very flat organization, which is cool because it empowers everybody, because it is flatter, there is less sort of steps up. There is no sort of district directors or a lot of VP positions. So there wasn't a whole lot of other room to grow. So, to be honest, I gave them at the beginning of the year, this particular year, I gave them the rest of the year to find me a new challenge to go take on. And if they couldn't give me that challenge, I was going to have to go somewhere else. And ultimately, they didn't find it, right? So that is how I ended up at TI. So there, I actually had a great connection with TI already because of some networking I had already done, and I knew folks there. I'll tell you a little bit more on the last card over here. But I was able to, because of networking, because of having those relationships that I've built and nurtured, I was able to basically walk into the TI, recruiting room and say, hey, I would like a job in logistics. And their response was essentially, go pick the one you want. And again, that's not because I'm like an Einstein or anything like that, but it was just because of those relationships that I was able to build. So I picked the stockroom manager role, which basically means that you're holding all the raw materials and all the replacement parts for the fabs that are making all of the semiconductors, aka computer chips, that are in all of your phones and computers and whatnot. This was right around the time, this was before COVID, so we weren't having like that whole computer chip shortage crisis and stuff yet. That was in my next role. So the cool thing here was new challenges. I got to be back on the shipper side. Again, as I was saying earlier, the people that are making things and selling things that are Fortune 500 companies, typically there's going to be higher compensation and way cooler benefits that go along with working at a company like that. The downside, or the thing that you learn, is that when you're in a big company, you are typically a smaller cog in a big machine with a pretty narrow scope of influence. And that's different than these roles here, right, which are much smaller companies where you have a much broader kind of scope of influence and scope of work. But it was cool. It was still really cool. I got to be on the UNT recruiting team. I think I was actually like the lead recruiter for coming here to UNT and hiring logistics and supply chain students for internships and full-time roles at TI. If I remember, TI has like 500 interns every summer. Crazy. Obviously not all from UNT. A lot of those are engineers and that sort of thing. Speaking of engineers, engineers are really smart people. I learned that here because of what it takes to build computer chips that are like the size of a head of a pen, right? That make all of our electronics today work. And even though that's really cool and really fancy, all this engineering and science, but at the end of the day, there still has to be logistics and supply chain people that take care of all of the sort of operations and hold it all together to get a finished product into your laptop at the end of the day. And so that was pretty sweet. It was a really cool opportunity. And this is about when I started working on my MBA at UT Dallas. So from there, it was really sweet at TI. My first week, maybe my second week being there, I got asked by my manager then, hey, what's the next job that you want? And I was like, hey, I don't even have my SAP login yet, and you're already asking me where I want to go as my next role here at TI, and I've only met like 10 other people. But he had already started planting the seeds of where do you want to go next, and pay attention in the different meetings, the different people you meet, and be thinking about it. So I was already on a track to what do I want to do next, even like within my first week or two of this new job. And so one of those things I wanted to do next was go be on the finished goods side of the business. So stockroom was raw materials into the plants. Finished goods was everything coming out of the plant ready and packaged up and ready to go and being shipped out to all those manufacturers of electronics across the world. So I had an opportunity to do that, which was really cool. In this role, it was actually DHL that was running the facility. I think it was TI's building, DHL staffed it and operated it. And then I was basically that one point of contact at TI that was responsible for operating, making all the decisions about how that facility runs. So it was super high tech, pretty good work-life balance. If you're familiar, auto stores, these robots that, kind of automagically pick and move things for you. And I got to be kind of part of the team that helped to implement that and then take that and turn it into some different sort of ways of doing business on a global scale. And so that was really cool. It was even so cool that when I worked there is when the Snowmageddon happened 2 or 3 years ago, and we were all out of electricity for like 3 or 4 or 5 days, depending on where you lived. So my facility, that facility also did not have any power for 3 or 4 days. People could not get into work. We were working on getting a big power generator that's the size of like an 18-wheeler to come plug into the building and be able to turn the building back on so we could turn on the robot so we could keep distribution going. But FedEx and all those guys weren't running to come pick up the finished goods anyway if we did get shipments done. And anyway, we couldn't get that generator onto the site because it had to be trucked there and all the roads were iced and slicked over. And we were and the closest one we could get to here in Dallas was in New Orleans. And it took him 3 days to try to get here from New Orleans and still just barely crossed the line into Texas when the lights came back on here. So lights came back on, everyone goes back to work. We canceled the order for the big mobile generator, right? But those sort of like just solving problems, making things happen, things that you don't quite plan for. Now we all know to plan for Snowmageddon to happen every February or January. So that was that. The other thing that I learned here is that small incremental change is not my jam also. In sort of companies where a thing or a process has been happening for years and years and years, and then you show up and they say, here's the operator's manual, just keep doing this. That works for a particular kind of mindset, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna make a 1% improvement on this year over year, get my paycheck, go home, and I'm good. But that doesn't work for me 100%. I like to say, I want to change this process by 50%. I want to make crazy sweeping changes and have really like a big, if you want to say imprint on what's going on. And so that's kind of what that operation was like. It was in existence. You walk in, you just keep the lights on and make small changes to make it better. Again, I kind of had to learn that that's just not 100% the way that I like to work. And the other thing is that I learned kind of with both of these is that when you're in a big corporation and you are part of a cost center, which you're not generating money for the company, it's going to be incumbent upon you to understand finance really, really well, to make a business case for any investments that you want to invest in, and prove that buying these new forklifts or prove that making this repair is going to make us more efficient and help us make more money, and it's going to pay itself off in 2 years. And so you've got to really be really good at that. And like I had said a while ago, my time here at Main Freight and just saying, hey, if you want to go spend the money and you think it's going to make it better, go do it. Like I said, that kind of wrecked me a little bit for here because there was just so many steps in the process to accomplish things and to get things done. It's necessary because it's such a big organization and it's a publicly traded company. They have to control all the spending, have to control all these decisions, but it's a necessary evil kind of thing. Moving on. Okay, so here I took a calculated risk. I had an opportunity to come over here to a place called Gatik, which was making autonomous vehicles, autonomous trucks. How could you turn down working for a Silicon Valley self-driving vehicles company? I was running their operations here in Texas. We had multiple pilot programs going on with multiple large organizations that I'm not allowed to tell you about, I think, still. But they have gone public with like Kroger and Walmart and some other businesses that we were running pilots with. But kind of got to cut my teeth on what, the future of transportation is like, LiDARs, radars, sonars, all this like high accuracy GPS that's accurate to, I think, like 5 centimeters. The GPS in your phones is accurate to 5 meters, I think. So got to see that, got to be like on some film sets for publicizing these things. Went to multiple conferences and took the trucks there to be able to showcase them. But what I learned is that high tech is a lot about selling a dream and selling something that maybe doesn't 100% exist yet. Perfect example is this truck right here is a truck made by Nikola, a company called Nikola, 100% electric 18-wheeler. The founder, CEO of that company last month was sentenced to 4 years in prison for defrauding the public and investors and customers because they shot a video of this truck showing it in action to showcase that it was working. In reality, they put it at the top of a hill and let it roll down the hill and caught it going and said, yeah, we're doing this. So there's an element of that in a lot of the tech startups, a lot of the high tech business that you see. You see, Elon Musk talking about robo-taxis and Amazon guys, Jeff Bezos talking about drone deliveries like 10 years ago, and like drone delivery will come next year and it'll come next year. So that happens in that sort of part of the world. And I did learn that even very small, tiny startup companies can still have a lot of red tape and kind of really restrict the advancement and the flow of getting things done. You don't have to be just a big company, you can also be a small company. So there's just variables that you can change about how you run your business, regardless of the size of it. Okay, so that kind of brings me to where I am today, which is about 1.5 years ago, left Gatik. I was fortunate enough to have some savings, have a network of people that I felt like I could rely on, and have some opportunities to be able to go start my own business. So what is that business? I'm still trying to figure out 100% what it is and what it will be. But right now, I do have like a trucking brokerage company. I'm an agent for a company called SPI Logistics. And with that, I move things from the size of this room to just small little individual packages. So I do a little bit of transportation. I also do warehousing, mostly as a broker, right? So I don't own any assets and I don't have any employees myself. I'm just the person that helps set things up and make things happen in the middle. The other thing that I do is some consulting, fractional leadership. So there's actually a logistics company, a 3PL here in Dallas, that I serve as their director of operations. So on a part-time basis, I get to kind of play this role of being strategic and setting policies and the direction for the company at an operations level. And then also I've started a media sort of part of the business where I film things. More specifically, I have this YouTube channel, please go look it up and subscribe, called Chaney, and it's on tour. So what I do is basically like MTV Cribs or like how it's made, but I go and I film tours of facilities that are logistics or supply chain in nature, from a bagel shop to, this is the city of Louisville's fleet maintenance building, that's amazing, to all kinds of businesses, just seeing how they operate and how they run. Again, it's like MTV Cribs, but for supply chain nerds. Anywho, so what I've learned here is that when you're alone and you're an entrepreneur, you are responsible for motivating yourself to get out of bed, and every hour that you put in of the day, you have to motivate yourself and hold yourself accountable to working that hour and the next one and the next one and the next one, because there is no one really there holding you accountable. There's no colleague in the desks beside you that you can chat with. It is a bit of work. But not to say that it doesn't have its perks, right? Is the flexibility. There is no sort of earning cap, right? Like when you're working at a company, you're going to make this salary, you're going to make a bonus, whatever. But there's a ceiling there as to how much you're going to make, unless you go have a side hustle and you do some other things, right? But when you've got your own business, as much time as you put in and as much as you want to work on it is how much of a return you're going to get out of it. So you really get to be sort of master of your own destiny, but there are risks with that because maybe it doesn't all work out and you don't have a paycheck coming in, right? Okay, last one, looking at time. So the secret ingredient, I would say, to kind of all these places that I've been has been CSCMP, which stands for the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. I did a little bit of that when I was here in school, when I was in y'all's seats. I got bonus points for going to these events, right? I got like 5 extra points on my tests or whatnot. So I was like the hungry college kid that went to these events when I was younger and heard someone speak and had a free meal. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. When I became a manager here at Main Freight, it clicked again that, oh yeah, that CSCMP thing, that's where people go to recruit people. That's where people go to network and sell their services or their goods. That's how they go and like develop and keep learning and knowing what's going on in the market. And so I went and got plugged back into that organization here when I became that manager for the first time. I regret not staying part of it in my first years. I would have probably gotten something out of it, but it is what it is. But what it has allowed me to do is see a ton of different facilities. It's really what inspired me to start my Supply Chain on Tour episodes, is because a lot of companies don't let their employees go out and see and develop and get new ideas. And you've got to be able to like get yourself away from your desk and away from your day job to get those ideas and to be innovative. I got to lead a group of people, so I worked my way from like a very entry level, like I was in charge of making badges at all the events, and over the next 4, 5, 6 years, I worked my way up to being the president of that organization. So that I had like 20 or so different volunteers. I was VP of events, the VP of membership and recruiting and all that sort of stuff, and it was a great lesson, I put it here, it was a great lesson on if you can manage and inspire and lead a group of people that don't actually have to do it because it's not their day job, they're volunteers. It's a great exercise of your leadership capabilities if you're able to accomplish things. And we were actually able to accomplish a lot. I got awarded up on stage as being like one of the, future leaders of supply chain and whatnot. And I was able to take a lot away from the time I put into that organization. A lot, because it opened the doors here at Texas Instruments, and it would open the door to Gaddick as well. And now, as an entrepreneur, it kind of serves as that network of people that I know I can rely on to go get help with my business or sell my services to or just get publicity or whatever it might be. Okay, I know that we are at time. I like to be punctual, so final thoughts. You can advance your career by staying the course that you're in. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like I could have stayed at PepsiCo, and I would have eventually, I would have moved up through time there. But that's kind of not my style. I'm not a patient person. So you can also advance your career by jumping out, right? And going and chasing kind of the next challenge or opportunity. Also, there's many, many decisions and directions that you're gonna have to take, and you will make some mistakes. I know I made my share and kind of talked about a few here, but you gotta just make them lessons that you've learned from and kind of make lemonade with those lemons and make the best of it with your next sort of moves. Always be learning. And then enjoy the journey. There's a lot of thought, right, which is that don't set your definition of success or your happiness on getting to that next promotion or that next pay level, because when you get there, you're gonna be pretty excited for like a month or so, and then the newness and the coolness of it is gonna wear off, and you're just gonna be setting your sight on the next promotion and the next pay level. So try to enjoy what comes in the middle times between those milestones, because that's really what life is made out of, is that journey. And so try to appreciate and enjoy that as much as you can. All right, so that's the presentation, and I'll open it up for any questions. And I guess if y'all have other things you need to go do, then please go do them, but I'll be here.